mall's back halls reeked of old popcorn and something sharp, like metal. I was stuck at my job, gas guard, a small gas station stand, in the middle of the night. It was 2 a.m., and the only sound was a dripping pipe. Then it started. A choked-off cry ripped through the quiet, so close it felt like it was inside me. It came from the employee washroom just a few steps away. I'm Alex, 19. I took this night job to hide from my past, to forget things. My eyes were always tired, and I felt heavy all the time. I tried to stare at the flashing price signs, but the crying wouldn't stop. It sounded so broken, so old. Every part of me screamed to call the guards, but a cold fear kept me frozen. It was that feeling again, the one that whispers, some things are better left alone. Then the crying just stopped. A heavy, quiet silence fell, thicker than before. It swallowed the low hum of the mall, even the dripping pipe. My heart pounded like a drum. I gripped the counter, my knuckles white. A cold bead of sweat ran down my face. And then, from the washroom, a voice, soft and shaky, echoed, "Hello?" It was my voice. I hadn't moved, I hadn't spoken. But my voice, exactly like mine, had just come from that closed door. The hairs on my arms stood up. My skin felt like it was crawling. It was like hearing a recording of myself that I never made, but way scarier. I gasped. My eyes jumped around the bright stand. The motor oil, the jerky, the candy bars. They seemed to shimmer, their shapes looking wrong. My scared face in the glass display stared back at me, wide-eyed and ghostly. I reached out, my hand shaking, and touched my throat. It was dry. "Hello?" My voice echoed again, a little shaky, closer now, too close. The washroom door, a plain metal slab, was still shut tight. It hadn't opened, no one had come out. But my voice was there. I felt sick. Was I dreaming? Was I losing my mind? The bad things from my past, the memories I tried to bury, sometimes felt like they were trying to break out. But this was different. This was real. A whisper followed, so quiet it was almost a rustle, like dry leaves. "Don't leave me." This wasn't my voice. It was rough, old, like rocks scraping together. It came from the same washroom, making me ice cold. This wasn't a trick. This wasn't something I imagined. This was utterly, deeply wrong. My eyes were glued to the washroom door. The heavy silence stayed, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with a strong presence, a weight that pushed down on me, stealing my breath. I wanted to scream, to run, to hit the emergency button, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like lead, my voice stuck in my throat. Then a faint scratching sound began from inside the washroom. It was slow at first, like fingernails dragging on a wall, then faster, more wild, like something trying to claw its way out. The sound got louder, a desperate scraping noise, with soft, wet thuds, like something hitting the floor. Again and again. My breath caught. The scratching stopped as fast as it started. And then slowly, very slowly, the door to the employee washroom began to creak open, just a tiny bit. A tiny bit of pure, deep darkness. The tiny crack in the washroom door widened, just enough to show an inky blackness inside. It wasn't just dark. It was a hungry, heavy darkness that ate the light from my stand. A cold breeze snaked out, carrying a smell like old, wet stone, and something else. Something sickly sweet, like rot and cheap perfume. My teeth began to chatter, not from cold, but from pure terror. I remembered what Mr. Henderson, the old, tough security guard, had told me. "This mall's got a past, kid. Built on an old graveyard," they say. "Don't go poking around the unused parts, especially at night. Things stir, I'd laughed it off then, thinking he was just trying to scare me. Now his words echoed in my head, a chilling warning. My own past, the one I was trying to run from, was tied to a different kind of darkness, but this felt older, deeper. The scratching started again, softer this time, but it wouldn't stop. It sounded like it was right behind the crack in the door. Then a low growl, deep and rough, made the floorboard shake. It wasn't an animal sound. It was something else. Something knowing. My heart jumped into my throat, choking me. My phone, lying on the counter, buzzed. It was a text from Sarah, my only friend since I moved here. "You okay? Mall's weird tonight. Power flicker at my place." I stared at the message, a lifeline in this scary mess, but my fingers wouldn't move. I couldn't look away from the door. A shadow, darker than the darkness itself, shifted inside the washroom. It wasn't a clear shape, more like a hole in the darkness, a void that pulled at my eyes. I could almost hear a whisper from it, a faint hissing sound that wrapped around my ears, just beyond understanding. It sounded like names being called, names I knew but couldn't remember where from. I thought of my little sister Maya, gone too soon. The guilt I carried was a heavy stone in my stomach, always reminding me of my failure. Was this punishment? Was something coming for me? The fear of the unknown mixed with my own painful memories, creating a suffocating pressure in my chest. I felt exposed, helpless, as if the darkness knew all my secrets. The mall had other strange rules, like never leaving the stand unlocked, not even for a second, and always checking the back storage room. And the weirdest one, never looked directly into the reflection of the glass doors at the main entrance after midnight. "Bad luck," the manager had said with a strange look in her eye. I'd ignored it, but now, every strange rule felt like a warning. The air in the stand grew colder, the bright lights flickering weakly, casting dancing shadows that looked like grabbing fingers on the walls. The smell got stronger, sickly sweet, like 1,000 dead flowers, and something metallic and sharp. I could see my breath, a fragile cloud in the freezing air. Suddenly, a small, dark object rolled out from the crack in the washroom door. It stopped at my feet. It was a grimy child's doll, its porcelain face cracked, one button eye missing, and a faint, dried stain on its torn dress. It looked ancient, forgotten, yet strangely familiar. As I stared at it, the doll's one good eye, a single dark bead, seemed to turn and fix on me. A faint, almost silent giggle floated from inside the washroom, a sound both innocent and deeply disturbing. It was the sound of a child, but twisted, full of evil joy. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet, and fell hard against the shelves of motor oil, sending bottles clattering. The doll lay there, its single eye still fixed on me, and in the deepening darkness of the washroom, the shadows seemed to come together, to get thicker, to take shape. The dark shape in the washroom solidified, not into a clear form, but a shifting, wavering outline that seemed to drink the light. It pulsed faintly like a distorted heartbeat in the suffocating darkness. The doll lying at my feet kept staring, its single eye a black pit that seemed to swallow my fear. The cold got worse, a deep, painful chill that made my muscles lock up. A voice, not the rough whisper, not my own echo, but a new voice, soft and musical, yet filled with a chilling sweetness, spoke from the shadow. "You came back, Alex. I knew you would." My blood ran cold. How did it know my name? I'd never said it out loud here. My mind spun, trying to find a normal explanation, but there wasn't one. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a dream. This was something that shouldn't exist, something that reached into the deepest, most secret parts of my mind. The air around me seemed to shimmer. Bright lights above flickered wildly, then pulsed, making the stand look like it was flashing, and the shelves seemed to twist and stretch. The smell of rot and sickly sweetness grew so strong it burned my nose. I pressed myself against the counter, breathing in ragged gasps. Suddenly, my reflection in the glass display case changed. It wasn't me anymore. It was Maya. Her face pale and see-through, her eyes wide and sad. She was wearing the dress I remembered, the one she wore that last day. Her lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear over the ringing in my ears, but her face showed deep sadness mixed with an unsettling emptiness. Then her image flickered and she was gone, replaced by a horrible, stretched face, twisted in a silent scream. It was as if the glass itself was a door, showing glimpses of things that shouldn't be. The room around me began to spin, not really, but as if everything was coming apart. The walls seemed to breathe, the shelves of snacks blurring into lines of color. The sound of the dripping pipe changed into a rhythmic thump, 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 like something heavy being dragged across concrete. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperate for it to stop, to wake up from this nightmare. When I opened them, the stand was different. The shelves were empty, bare. The bright counter was gone, replaced by an old, scarred wooden desk, covered in rusty tools and faded old plans. The air was thick with dust and the smell of damp earth, not popcorn. I was no longer in the gas guard stand, but in a dimly lit, huge space that stretched into total darkness. The washroom door was gone. Pure, raw panic hit me. Where was I? This wasn't the mall. A single, bare light bulb hung from the ceiling, swinging slightly, casting long, dancing shadows that stretched and pulled back like grabbing claws. The rhythmic thumping sound was louder here, closer, echoing from the darkness. Then I saw them. Lying on the floor, half hidden by the shadows, were bodies. Not whole bodies, but shapes covered by old, dirty sheets. They were still. Too still. The smell of rot was overwhelming now, a suffocating blanket. One of the sheets had slipped, showing a pale, lifeless hand, its fingers curled in. A figure came out of the deeper darkness, tall and thin. It wasn't the shifting shadow from the washroom, but something more solid, more like a human, yet completely wrong. Its clothes were old, stained, and it moved in a jerky, unnatural way. As it stepped into the faint light, I saw its face. It was impossibly thin, stretched tight over sharp bones, and its eyes were dull, glassy like a dead fish. They were fixed on me, unblinking. It raised a hand, long, bony fingers, pointing past me into the darkness beyond the stand. A voice low and rough, yet filled with a strange, sad tone, whispered, "She waits." Then a sudden, blinding flash of white light erupted from behind me, making everything stand out sharply. The bodies, the thin figure, the old desk, all vanished in the sudden glare. My ears rang, a high-pitched whine that drowned out all other sound. When my vision cleared, I was back in the familiar, brightly lit gas guard stand. The washroom door was closed. The doll was gone, but a single, small, dried-up rose petal, brown and brittle, lay on the shining tiled floor, right where the doll had been. I stumbled back, my legs weak, and fell into the plastic chair behind the counter. My entire body shook, a tremor that went deeper than my bones. The rose petal lay stark against the clean tile, a tiny, undeniable proof of what I had seen. But how? How had I been pulled into that horrifying place only to be yanked back? Was it a dream? A hallucination caused by being tired and my old pain? But the smell of rot still clung to my clothes, and the cold hadn't left my skin. The quiet returned, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not peaceful, but watching. Every shadow seemed to hold a hidden threat. Every distant hum of the mall felt like something terrible was about to happen. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that I was no longer alone in this mall. And whatever was here, it knew me. It knew about Maya. I reached for my phone, my fingers fumbling, and called Sarah. She answered, her voice sleepy. "Alex? What's up? You sound weird." "Sarah," I whispered, my voice rough. "You won't believe what just happened." I told her everything, the voice, the doll, the twisted reflection, the changing reality, and the bodies. As I spoke, her sleepy voice grew sharp, then disbelieving. "Alex, are you okay? You sound really stressed. There was no power flicker at my place either. You must have dreamt it." Her words hit me hard. She didn't believe me. How could she? It sounded crazy. The very real horror I had just experienced was dismissed as a nightmare. The loneliness that had pushed me to this isolated job returned, stronger than ever. I was truly alone in this. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of being on high alert. Every creak, every distant noise sent jolts of fear through me. I kept glancing at the washroom door, half expecting it to open again, half praying it wouldn't. The rose petal remained on the floor, a constant reminder. When Mr. Henderson arrived for the morning handover, his face still tough, I barely managed to say hello. He looked at me, a flicker of something in his eyes, as if he sensed the lingering unease, but said nothing. As I walked out of the mall into the harsh morning light, the normal world felt strange. Cars zoomed by, people walked on the sidewalks, but it all seemed far away, like a play happening behind a glass wall. The sunlight, usually comforting, now felt weak, unable to truly get rid of the shadows that clung to me. I reached into my pocket and felt a small, hard object. I pulled it out. It was a small, tarnished silver locket. I had never seen it before. It had detailed carvings of twisting vines and what looked like a weeping eye. My heart pounded. I hadn't owned a locket since before Maya, and this wasn't mine. I tried to open it, but it was stuck shut. A faint metallic smell, familiar and unsettling, clung to it. The same smell I'd noticed in the washroom. I closed my hand around the locket, the cold metal digging into my palm. It felt like a string, linking me back to that terrifying night, to the unknown. The mall, huge and silent behind me, seemed to watch. I had survived the night, yes, but not unharmed. The fear wasn't gone, it had just changed. Settled deeper inside me, a silent, constant companion. The world, once a place I just wanted to escape, now felt like a fragile shell, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it could crack again at any moment. Days turned into a week. Each night shift at Gas Guard, a terrifying countdown. The locket, cold and heavy, stayed in my pocket. I tried to open it again and again, scratching at its stubborn clasp, but it wouldn't budge. It felt like a secret waiting to be shown, a key to the horrors I'd seen. Sleep became something I couldn't get, haunted by the shifting shadows, the ghostly voices, and the chilling image of Maya's face in the glass. I started seeing things, quick flashes of movement out of the corner of my eye, shadows that stretched too long. My worry grew, a suffocating blanket that wrapped around me, making every step feel like walking on thin ice. I looked up the mall's history online. desperate try to find answers. Old news articles talked about it being built in the 1970s on what was once an old cemetery. There were whispers of accidents during building, strange disappearances, and even a few deaths that were never solved. One article mentioned a missing persons case from the late 1980s about a young girl just a few years older than Maya would have been. Her name was Evelyn. She had disappeared from the mall, never found. A faint picture of a child's doll was in the article, a grim police drawing. The doll looked exactly like the one that had rolled out of the washroom. The connection hit me hard. Evelyn, the doll, the cemetery. It all started to come together into a horrifying picture. Was she the one? Was her spirit stuck here, trying to tell me something? Or was she something far more evil? One night during a really bad rainstorm, the power in the mall kept flickering. The gas guard stand went dark for seconds at a time, then flashed back on. During one of these blackouts, a gust of wind, impossibly strong for inside, ripped through the service hallway. Papers flew everywhere, and the locket, which I had placed on the counter for a moment, was swept off. I crawled on my hands and knees in the sudden darkness, desperate to find it. My hand touched something cold and slippery. My fingers closed around it. It was the locket. But as I pulled it to the faint light of my phone, the clasp clicked open. Inside, resting against faded velvet, was a tiny, yellowed photograph. It was a picture of Maya, her sweet face smiling up at me, taken just weeks before. My heart jumped into my throat. How? This locket wasn't mine. It couldn't have her picture. And then, under the photo, carved into the silver, were two words. It was you. A cold dread spread through me, chilling me to my core. It wasn't about Evelyn or the mall's dark past. It was about me, the locket, the doll, the voices. They weren't random. They were connected to my own unspeakable guilt, the secret I carried. I had been responsible for Maya's death. A moment of carelessness, a mistake, and she was gone. The memory of her innocent face, now trapped in this eerie locket, was a fresh wound. The words, "It was you," repeated in my mind, echoing the accusation I constantly whispered to myself. The horrors of the mall weren't just outside. They were a twisted mirror, showing my deepest fears, my unforgivable past. The entity, whatever it was, knew. It had reached into my soul and pulled out my greatest pain. A low, sad hum began to come from the open locket, a sound that connected with the forgotten parts of my own mind. It was a lament, a song of sadness and blame, and it was aimed only at me. The mall wasn't just haunted, it was a prison for those who carried the heaviest burdens, and I had unknowingly walked straight into its traps. I had nowhere left to run. The hum from the locket grew, filling the silent stand, a mournful song of blame. It echoed the familiar ache in my chest, the constant throbbing of guilt. The little photo of Maya, her sweet, innocent face, seemed to look out at me with a chilling understanding. The "it was you" echoing in my mind. The mall wasn't just a place of fear. It was a reflection of my inner struggle, a stage for my personal doom. I gripped the locket, holding it so tightly that the silver dug into my skin. The humming inside it got louder, becoming a piercing whine, a chorus of ghostly whispers that seemed to scream, "It was you! It was you!" I stumbled out from behind the counter, pulled by a strange, strong feeling. The washroom door, usually just a dull metal slab, now seemed to glow with a faint internal light. I knew, with a certainty that made no sense, that I had to go in. The source of the pain, the heart of this twisted haunting, was inside. As I pushed the door open, there was no resistance. It swung inward, silently, showing not the dirty washroom I knew, but the huge, dust-filled space I'd seen before. The single, bare light bulb still swung overhead, casting long, dancing shadows. And there they were, the covered shapes, the silent bodies, stretching into the unseen darkness. My breath caught. The air was thick with the overpowering smell of damp earth and rot. The temperature dropped sharply, a bone-aching cold that felt like a hand gripping my heart. I took a step forward, then another, pulled by an invisible force. My eyes fell on the partially uncovered body, the pale, lifeless hand, its fingers curled. A whisper, both ancient and very familiar, brushed against my ear. "You brought her here." I spun around, but there was nothing. The voice was everywhere and nowhere, a shaking in the air. My eyes darted from body to body, the shapes under the sheets chilling me to the core. This wasn't just a graveyard. It was a holding place, a cold, eternal waiting room for those who were forgotten. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the far end of the room, tall and thin, its face impossibly thin, its eyes glassy and unblinking. It was the same figure I'd seen before, the one that had pointed into the darkness. It raised a hand, its long, bony finger now pointing directly at me. "She blames you," it rasped, its voice like grinding stones. My eyes snapped back to the bodies, and then I saw it. One of the smaller shapes, barely visible under the torn sheet, seemed to move. A child's form. My blood ran cold. The guilt, a huge wave of sadness washed over me, threatening to drown me. "Maya," I whispered, the name a broken sound torn from my throat. The thin figure took a step forward, then another, its movements jerky and unnatural. Its eyes, those dull, dead eyes, were fixed on me with an unsettling stare. It wasn't just a monster. It was an accuser, a silent judge. I gripped the locket, holding it so tightly that the silver dug into my skin. The humming within it got louder, becoming a piercing whine, a chorus of ghostly whispers that seemed to scream. "It was you. It was you." The room began to spin again, faster this time, the shadows stretching and twisting into ugly shapes. The bodies under the sheets seemed to squirm, their outlines blurring. The cold was too much, a sharp pain in my lungs. I felt myself falling, pulled down by an unseen force, down into the endless darkness. The last thing I saw before the world disappeared into a swirling mix of shadow and sound was Maya's face, not in the locket, but floating above the small, still shape under the sheet. Her face showed deep sadness, her eyes filled with unshed tears, and her lips moved, forming a single, heartbreaking word. "Why?" Then the darkness swallowed me. I don't know how long I was lost in that swirling emptiness, or if I ever truly left it. When I finally came to, the world was a dull, muted gray. I was back in the gas guard stand, slumped against the counter. The fluorescent lights hummed, but their glow seemed weaker, unable to fully chase away the thick gloom. The washroom door was closed, just as it had been before, a harmless metal slab guarding an unspeakable secret. The locket was still clutched in my hand, but it felt heavier and colder. I pulled it open. Maya's photo was still there, but her smiling face was now faded, blurry, as if seen through a veil of tears. The carved words, "It was you," seemed to glow with a faint internal light, a constant burning accusation. I tried to close it, but the clasp was broken, forever showing my shame. I looked around the stand. Nothing was physically changed, yet everything felt completely different. The air tasted stale, and the usual sounds of the mall were muffled, as if heard through a thick, invisible wall. I felt detached, like I was watching my own life, a ghost haunting a familiar place. The terror hadn't gone away. It had just settled, a heavy, permanent weight in my soul. I was no longer afraid of what the mall would do to me. I was afraid of what it had already done. My shift ended, and I walked out into the uncaring morning light. The world still seemed far away, a muted play. The people bustling around me were strangers, their worries small. I saw a young mother holding her child's hand, and a sharp pang of pain tore through me. A reminder of what I'd lost, what I'd done. The image of Maya's tearful face, floating above the covered body, was burned into my mind, a never-ending accusation. I never went back to the mall. I couldn't. The thought of that place, of the service hallway, of the washroom, filled me with an icy dread that was in every part of my being. My life became a series of quiet, lonely days and restless, nightmare-filled nights. I moved to a small, isolated town, seeking a solitude that I now wanted, but it was a cold comfort. The silence was always filled with echoes of whispers, of scratching, of Maya's voice. I tried to get rid of the locket. I threw it into a wild river, buried it deep in the ground, even tried to burn it. But every time it appeared again, usually on my pillow, sometimes in my pocket, it was tied to me, a constant reminder of my guilt, a cursed anchor to the darkness I had unknowingly set free. It wasn't just a physical object. It was a piece of the horror, a fragment of my broken soul. The emotional scars were deep, jagged wounds that refused to heal. I rarely slept, constantly looking over my shoulder, sure that the shadows from the mall would eventually catch up. Every reflection I saw, in a window or a mirror, I braced myself for the twisted faces, the haunting images of the past. My paranoia was a living thing, breathing down my neck. I was no longer Alex, the young man trying to escape his past. I was a vessel for a lingering horror, a witness to unspeakable things. Sometimes, late at night, when the world outside was quiet, I would hear it. A faint, low hum, like the locket, coming from seemingly nowhere. And then a whisper, just barely audible, carried on the wind. It was not the entities of the mall, but a voice I recognized, forever burned into my memory, a child's voice. "You left me," it would say. And I knew, with a certainty that froze my blood, that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed, and some debts, once incurred, can never truly be repaid. The whispers, the hum, the ghost of Maya's voice, they never truly left me. They became the background noise of my life, a constant, chilling reminder that some stains can never be washed away. I exist now in a gray world, caught between reality and the lingering horror I brought back from that mall. Every shadow holds a secret, every silence a hidden scream. The world around me is merely a fragile shell, and underneath, I know, the darkness churns. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. I learned that too late. The scent of rust and damp earth, that distinctive mall smell, sometimes drifts into my room, even when the windows are shut. And occasionally, when the moon is full and the night is deepest, I can hear a faint, distant drip, 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 like a leaky pipe echoing in a deserted service corridor, a sound that promises the return